it's time to get out of the comfort zone because these people aren't playing games. 9/11 was an inside job. 9/11 was an inside job. 9/11 was an inside job.
We're going to organize. Humanity's going to come together. We are swinging muskets here, toe-to-toe with the globalists. They're bloodied, we're bloodied. It is absolute, total war.
Good evening and happy Friday. It's INFOWARS Nightly News, and I'm your fill-in host, Rob Dew. Alex is taking a night off after he had a really long week, but it was a very interesting week news-wise, and we've got a great show for you. Coming up, we're going to be visited by Marjorie Farabee. She's with donkeyscando.com, and they recently were rebuffed in their efforts to put a 103,000 signature petition. They were trying to bring it up to Austin, and they were told they could not enter for various reasons. And then next, the interview that didn't happen yesterday will happen today. Pepe Escobar will be joining us from the Asia Times to talk about all things Iran and what's going on in the Middle East. And finally, after our break, we're going to have Mike Adams, the health ranger, sitting in studio to talk about a host of issues, including cancer and an article that we're going to cover later about cyborg implants. But let's get on with the news. This is an issue that's going to affect a lot of people, especially us, being a news organization who are granted fair use on certain things. When we see a news item that is important to us and fellow info warriors out there, we like to show it to you. And especially older works. There's older things that can be used to illustrate points today. Well, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled, and this was, I guess, published today in a 6-2 ruling. The court ruled that just because material enters the public domain, it is not territory that works may never exit. And this is from Ars Technica. The top court was ruling on a petition by a group of orchestra conductors, editors, performers, publishers, and film archivists who urged the justices to reverse an appellate court that ruled against the group, which has been relying on artistic works in the public domain for their livelihoods. So somebody takes Metropolis and adds a different movie score to it, which happens here in Austin a lot. Well, that won't be allowed if certain groups are allowed to come in and recopyright these works. And basically what this means, you know, fair use is going to be going the way of the dinosaur. You're going to have everybody under the sun copywriting everything and maintaining who has control onto that. We've already seen that happening in the internet. There's a company out there that wanted the color blue copyrighted and trademarked so they couldn't be used. And I just want to add one more quote here. Anthony Falzone, the executive director of the Fair Use Project at Stanford, said this. He said the decision was unfortunate, and it suggests Congress is not required to pay particular close attention to the interest of the public when it passes copyright laws, and he's speaking the truth there. And here we go on radiation news, which affects everyone, considering we have Fukushima, where they can't even find some of the fuel rods. A study finds that childhood leukemia rates double near nuclear power stations. The study by the French Institute of Health and Medical Research, or INSERM, found that leukemia rates are twice as high among children under the age of 15 living within a 3.1-mile radius of France's 19 nuclear power plants. INSERM has carried out similar research in conjunction with the Institute of Radio Protection and Nuclear Safety, or IRSN, and the team of 6 for over 2 decades, but they've never found a higher coincidence or incidence of leukemia. So they're finding it now, and it's because we got radiation everywhere under the sun, and now in our atmosphere and our water due to Fukushima, and for the next great disaster that awaits nuclear power, because it's not a true, well, it's a science, but it's not a science that is going to help us, and we need to find different ways to create power other than creating nuclear waste. Moving on, we got Ron Paul news. Ron Paul had a great showing in the debate last night, even though they tried to exclude him from several questions. But this just in from the state. To South Carolina supporters, Paul is a movement, not just a candidate. He has a vision of a broken America that requires extreme solutions. And this is done by several state senators. They got behind Paul, and their names are Danny Verdeen, Kevin Bryant, Lee Bright, and Tom Davis. We covered the Tom Davis endorsement earlier this week, and they had to say, Paul is as much as a movement as a candidate, offering an unorthodox Republican vision for restoring the country, they say, and he will speak for them when he wins Saturday's GOP primary or not. So whether he wins or not, these guys are behind him, and maybe the residents in South Carolina, which includes my father-in-law out there, should support Ron Paul because he is a man with a true vision, not just a bunch of hot air and bloated gas, which we'll get into later. Initial results show Ron Paul won the South Carolina Republican debate. There's many online polls which we're going to start pulling up. The first poll out of the Naples News. Who has your vote in the January 31st Florida GOP primary? 76% Ron Paul, 10% for Mitt Romney. Wow. The second poll, which is out of CNN. Which GOP candidate do you want to win the presidential nomination? 42% for Ron Paul, 29% for Mitt Romney. Next poll. Who won the Southern Republican presidential debate? That was from Poll Daddy. 98% Ron Paul, 1% Newt Gingrich, and all the rest. And finally, Newsday. With Huntsman and Perry dropping out this week, which GOP candidate will you support? 71% Ron Paul. The next closest is Newt Gingrich. So as you can see, most people out there want Ron Paul. They don't want any of these other guys, or at least the ones who are answering these poll questions. But I guess when you have the elections rigged and you can call it with a gentleman's agreement, you can make anybody win. There you go. We got some highlights from the debate. The first one, they asked Newt Gingrich if he was being attacked, if he felt he was being attacked by the media, and I guess they asked everybody else that question. And here's what Ron Paul had to say about the media.
I think too often all of us are on the receiving ends of attacks from the media, and it's very disturbing because sometimes they're not based on facts, and we suffer the consequences. You know, sometimes it reminds me of this idea of getting corporations out of running campaigns, but what about the corporations that run the media? I mean, they're always in charge.
And the next one, of course, is an issue that Ron Paul's dealt with a lot, and it's the issue of abortion. And apparently they weren't going to ask him that question after they asked the three other non-doctors the question. And the crowd started booing, and they wanted Ron Paul to answer the question. They wanted to hear his answer. And so with only 4 people being there, the idiot prostitute had to finally ask him the question. Here's the clip.
Let's take another question. Congressman, I'll bring you in on this one. Let's take a question now from social media. Question. Before we move on, you want in on this issue? They want you in on this issue. Would you like in on this issue?
But John, once again, it's a medical subject, and I'm a doctor, you know. No, I do want to make a couple comments because I can remember the very early years studying obstetrics, and I was told, and it was before the age of abortion, and I was told, taking care of a woman that's pregnant, you have 2 patients, and I think that solves a lot of the problem about, you know, when life begins and all. But I also...
Oh, and there's the 3 non-doctors looking on like, yeah, he's kind of right, actually. There was another question, a medical question. It was about Obamacare, and they asked all 3 of the other candidates what their opinion was, and then they didn't ask Ron Paul, and once again the crowd had to intervene on behalf of Ron Paul. And it's pretty sad that CNN, who employs Skeksis Award winner Dana Bash, I think that's her husband, actually, John King, so that they're working in tandem to try and keep the people from hearing about what Ron Paul has to say. But no matter how much they try, the message is getting out. And just as those South Carolina senators said, Ron Paul is a movement just as much as he is a candidate. And now we move on to a story that we covered back in October, which is going to lead into our next story. And it's Honduran farmers slaughtered in the name of global warming. And 23 farmers in Honduras were slaughtered in cold blood by hired mercenaries as they tried to protect their land from being seized by a corporation who wanted to use their land to produce biofuel as part of a United Nations accredited EU global trading scheme. And there you go. You have committees and organizations who have everybody's interest in mind except those they want to go out and kill, which we showed you last night when Alex went over all the instances in which the UN was killing people or kidnapping people, are not doing what they were supposed to do, and then you have the other people revolting, like the Haitians who are now saying, get out, and they're painting up the UN soldiers to look like chupacabras and stuff like that. Which leads us to this next one. Fans protest wild donkeys being killed at Big Bend Park. Well, how do wild donkeys and Honduran farmers, how do they relate? Well, you have these bureaucracies that are making these decisions and then implementing totalitarian, very threatening solutions, which involves killing things, in this case, wild donkeys, which are being slaughtered at Big Bend Park. And Texas Parks and Wildlife officials want to remove the animals from the 315,000-acre park in West Texas because there's just not enough room for 300 donkeys. And at least 75 have been shot from a herd of estimated up to 300. And with more on the needless slaughter of those cute little donkeys, we turn to Marjorie Farabee. She is the founder of the Wildboro Protection League, and she recently was featured in that Houston Chronicle article, going down to the Capitol trying to deliver a petition with over 100,000 signatures to get them to stop doing this out of Big Bend Park. Marjorie, how you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
We're doing great over here, and but I saw this story a couple days ago, and it really made me mad. So tell us about donkeys. What is their place in human history and development?
Well, it should make you mad. Donkeys are incredibly warm and caring creatures. They are a natural healer.